the UK government's main narrative is what they're trying to do is to make the illegal routes, what they call illegal routes, unviable, while making the legal routes more viable. But the reality is that the UK government has actually closed down all the legal and safe routes that migrants would use to come to the UK. The Syrian resettlement program has shut. The Dubs scheme, named after Lord Dubs, who set up the scheme to bring unaccompanied child refugees to the UK, has been shut down, and the promised Afghan resettlement scheme never actually launched. We're still waiting for that to happen. And so ultimately, you cannot expect refugees and migrants to form an orderly queue outside their destination country when actually the main routes in which they would come to the UK have been shut down. And I think particularly UK law makes it very difficult for them to come, because actually if you're claiming asylum, you have to, under UK law, do that within the UK's borders. But we also see both France and the British government trying to blame people smugglers. And of course, people smugglers are, responsible for, sending migrants on very, very unsafe conditions, these dinghies that we see. But unfortunately, we know that there are always going to be people who seek to exploit the suffering of very vulnerable people for personal profit. But ultimately, it's for governments to actually save life where they can. And certainly, there's things on both sides of the channel that both governments should and can be doing.
After Saturday's discussion, after Priti Patel was not allowed into that, is that the end of the line, or is she still talking with Daneman, her counterpart in France, through back channels, do you think?
Well, you're absolutely right when you say that it's very disappointing, and this crisis is simply not going to end by unilateral action on both sides of the channel. And I think, it's quite right that you pointed out that, it's partly Boris Johnson, the way that he communicated with the French government, that caused some of this breakdown relations. And of course, this is taking place in the context of deteriorating relations, really, since, Britain left the EU, between France and the UK. But I think, of course, it wasn't helpful that the Home Secretary Priti Patel was excluded from this meeting on Sunday. But I think that partly the cause of that was actually Boris Johnson's letter, which, of course, he published on Twitter, which blamed France for what happened. And I think really that shows how, on the UK side, obviously, of course, happening on France's side as well, but on the UK side, this issue is basically being sort of weaponized to turn into political capital for Boris Johnson's domestic audience. I think at a time when Johnson has been falling in the polls against the main opposition Labour Party here, and other domestic issues have been troubling him, he's clearly trying to exploit this issue to get political capital. And I think the fact that he put it on Twitter, as I mentioned, really provoked France into causing this. I think one thing it's also worth noting is that France has made absolutely clear, from its meeting on Sunday, that it wants to see any kind of agreement take place at an EU-UK level rather than a bilateral level between the UK and France. And I think France knows that ultimately it's going to be in a much stronger position if it basically relies on or gets the other 26 members of the EU to support it. And I think also the fact that France is going to be taking over the presidency of the EU Council in January will allow it to kind of project its policy priorities, of which this will be one. So I think we are going to see more talks ongoing. I think Priti Patel mentioned that she hoped to do that later this week with the EU. But, I don't have a huge amount of hopes for this being resolved, over a very quick time, mainly because of, what we've been hearing from both sides. And, I think because of the kind of militarization of the response of trying to simply shut down the route rather than, as I say, try to open up legal routes, I don't think we're going to see an immediate solution to this. Of course, accompanied by the fact that the French government has once again rejected proposals by the UK to try to come to some kind of solution to this. So I think, unfortunately, we are going to see this issue go on and on, of course, of which there are no winners. But, of course, huge suffering continues on the part of migrants.